James Schneider, the former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn. Good evening to both of you. Also, good evening to each and every one of you at home. It's not just about us. You can get in touch with me all the usual ways. Email gbviews@gbnews.com. Go to the website gbnews.com/yoursay, or of course you can tweet or X me. But look, big day today for the Conservative Party. Their conference continues. Let's cross live there to Christopher Hope, our political editor. Christopher, good evening to you. What have we missed?
Good evening, Michelle. Yeah, welcome to the ICC here in Birmingham. It's been a busy day. Of course, this party is out of government, 121 MPs, but you wouldn't know it. It's so busy. Part of the reason why is that all of the conference was booked and paid for before they called the early general election. And the idea had been, I think, that everyone thought that as much just to be a final pre-election party conference for the Tory party. Instead, the conference is still big, but the party's got small. To misquote a famous film star, in the sense that you have got a small party now. But what's happening here is you've got these four candidates wandering around here, Tom Tugendhat and Kevin Badenoch. They're two of them, and James Cleverly and Robert Jenrick. Now, Badenoch and Tugendhat, they're on stage with me earlier answering questions from party members and from me, representing GB News, to see what they had to say about their policies. I think it's quite interesting. You heard from Tom Tugendhat. He was saying that an apology for the infighting to the members that let you down. You couldn't really fight well for the seats when you're fighting amongst ourselves, he said. And his job is to reform the Tories, not become reform. So both Badenoch and Tugendhat agreed on that. Don't go towards reform. Don't do a deal with them. Stand where you are and believe in something to attract those voters back. He also paid credit to Boris Johnson, saying he did something amazing in office on Ukraine and COVID, so lots of support there. And he talked a lot about his time in the army as an army officer till 2013 for a decade, and his active service in Iraq and Afghanistan. Kevin Badenoch, she said that this party is in an existential crisis at this point. They need to get on and reform and find new ways of telling a story. She said that if you vote for Kevin Badenoch, if you're a Tory member, if she becomes leader, a lot of things will change. I think that she'll rethink what the Tory party is for, and that may be what a party with 121 MPs needs. She denied there was a Stop Kemi camp, and she said she would review the net zero target, and she defended her remarks about maternity pay, saying that many people had misquoted her, but not Times Radio, but others had misquoted her. And in fact, she was talking about overall the impact of regulation on companies. So all to play for, and tomorrow I'm doing the same again, an hour each with Robert Jenrick and James Cleverly. So tune in 2 till 4 on the channel and all day for the best coverage.
Interesting stuff. Chris, have you got your Tugendhat fake tan on by any chance?
No, I haven't, Michelle. I'm not even wearing a Tugendhat tattoo either, so I'm ink-free today.
Ink-free, there you go. Thank you very much for that update. If you don't know what I'm referring to, there are temporary tattoos for one of the leadership contenders, whatever you want to call them, and fake tan. I mean, if I ever get to a stage in life where I think to myself, I know what I need to do, I need to cover myself in the fake tan of a political candidate, I think I would have a strong word with myself in the mirror, wouldn't you? Anyway, look, this is your party's moment to shine. It's not very well attended, the conference. Does that bother you?
Well, it looks pretty well attended to me. Obviously, I'm only seeing it virtually as my husband's pulled a bit of an IOU with care for my son this week with his job. But look, this is a totally different conference from the type of conference we've seen for the last 14 years. It's the first one where we're actually in opposition, but it's also quite exciting because members are going to get a say over who the next leader is to be able to face that uphill challenge that we've got. So I personally backed Kemi Badenoch. I've done that from the very beginning of this contest. And I've done that because I think that she's straight-talking, she's a fresh face with some experience, though. And I think that if we're going to take this fight to reform as well as Labour, we're going to need somebody that is not afraid to mince their words.
Was you cringing when she was talking about this maternity stuff?
So, look, on that, there's absolutely no question. that maternity pay should not be any lower than it is. In fact, I think personally we should have a review as to what the rate should be and what the bigger issue should be on the table, which is the question of why are birth rates so low, which is storing up a problem for future generations. But Kemi's been quite clear that she didn't mean that. She meant the question about business regulation and taxation. And we all know what it's like when you're in an interview, I do especially. If you're trying to get everything out you possibly can in a short space of time, this is her way to communicate with members as well. She wanted to say what she wanted to say, basically. The interviewer wanted to talk about something else, and the two kind of mashed together, so the output got a bit confusing. But she has got a big point about business regulation. Businesses have faced far too much regulation and taxation over the years.
James?
I think it's a bit of a foot and mouth thing. I mean, you're a politician. You've been on many interviews. You might have something to say. The interviewer also is allowed to answer your questions. And to come out of one suggesting that you think that an ordinary person listening to it would think that you'd said that maternity pay was excessive and statutory maternity pay, because it comes out of taxation, is excessive, would be a bad look. Is a mistake. I mean, we have way too little support for parents and young families in the country, not only paternity and maternity pay, but also in childcare. And I think, any political leader that's trying to engage with the public is going to have to put forward policies that advance those things rather than attack them.
Someone's tweeted in as they're listening to our conversation now and said, Michelle, I can't employ a woman of childbearing age because my business won't function if she takes extended time off while being replaced by an inexperienced temp at my extra cost. What do you think to that?
Well, I mean, I think it's probably incumbent on that business to be able to replace somebody to cover for maternity leave. I think we need to be able to have businesses that can do that. I think that's very important. Otherwise, you're going to have women discriminated against at work.
Mm-hmm. What do you think to that comment?
I think maternity pay is absolutely essential to be able to give women choices and chances and equality. And without it, we wouldn't see as many women in the workplace. And it's important to remember that statutory maternity pay can actually be claimed back from HMRC in the main too.
One of the things, on a separate note, that Kemi Badenoch was saying today, you talk about taking the fight to reform. She said reform are not serious people.
So I think the broader thing of what she was saying was that actually we need to be taking the fight to everybody who's that's standing against the Conservative Party. I forget her exact words, but she was also saying that the Reform MPs themselves are not serious, but the voters who voted Reform are actually our voters in the main, the ones that voted Conservative before. So of course we need to be attracting those people back if we're going to be in a position to win back the country at large.
Is that fair, do you think, James?
I mean, clearly the Tories need to get votes from everywhere because they got very few in the last election. But particularly, the big story of the election from the Conservative side is that they lost more than half of their votes, a big chunk of them to Reform. Obviously, they're going to need to get those back. But they also lost votes in lots of other directions and lots of people staying home who had voted before. So I don't think it's quite so simple as if they just appeal to Reform voters, then suddenly they're going to go back into government.
I'd agree with that. It needs to be a broad base.
There's quite a few of you, and I have to say you are men, saying, Michelle, many business owners think that it's unfair that they have to spend extra money on replacing staff on maternity leave. How is that fair? I mean, I've got to say, you are all men that are giving me these kind of comments like that. Are you a female business owner? Do you share those concerns or not? Get in touch. Lots I need to talk to you about. Rosie Duffield, she has resigned. I also need to talk about steel, Tata Steel, and what's been going on in Austria. See you in 2.
GBNews Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Is the fact that electric blanket sales going up actually a good thing? This means that people are switched on to the problems that the winter might hold, that they might have some defence against it, or is it a real indictment of a Labour government that they aren't going to be able to, support elderly people in their hour of need?
Good morning, by the way.
Morning.
I think the sale of electric blankets may well be because we've had this cold snap because of the Arctic weather coming in from the north. However, I think it's an absolute reality that, as your clip said, that over 800,000 elderly people who are eligible for the winter fuel allowance, who can get pension credits, are struggling to apply. And so what is absolutely essential at the moment is that all of those older people who are eligible for pension credits do apply and do get what's owed to them. The benefits are owed to them. And that the average that people will get through pension credits is about £78 a week. So that's definitely going to make a massive difference to people who are really struggling.
What can organisations like yours do to encourage people to, I guess, educate themselves on technology and make that first step into the digital world, which is very intimidating at times?
Absolutely, and that's what we do at Good Things Foundation. So we're a national charity. We work all across the whole of the UK. And in your clip there, you had Links Digital, and they're a member of what we call the National Digital Inclusion Network, which is a network of local charities, small local community organisations, food banks, job centres, old people's clubs. So anyone, any organisation at that local level.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello everyone, Michelle Dewberry with you until 7 o'clock. Michelle Donnellan and James Schneider alongside me. I've opened a can of worms here, I can tell you that, because lots of people are getting in touch, and I asked for women's perspective as well. I've had women writing in as well saying that if they were business owners, they would avoid employing women of what they say are a certain age because of the cost of it all. Blimey, what do you make to all of that? Look, lots of other things I need to discuss with you tonight. We speak, don't we, about growth in this country and how important the UK economy is and all the rest of it. Well, today, the UK's biggest steelworks ends production after 100 years. You'll be familiar with this story, of course, by now. I'm talking about Tata Steel in South Wales, Port Talbot. I mean, don't even get me started on the fact that one of the reasons Tata are saying that they're closing this plant, one of the reasons is about things like climate concerns, but they're also simultaneously opening a blast furnace in India. But I have to ask, do you think we've done enough in this country to protect Port Talbot?
So I think the big issue of today is that the government are calling this a transition, but it's not really a transition, because what we're seeing is a big gap now, because the blast furnace shuts and then the more environmentally friendly one isn't going to be up and running for at least 5 years. Now, whilst that won't be providing as many jobs, it'll still be providing a substantial number of jobs. So you've got nothing in that interim. And this is a government that promised to be strong on steel. They haven't come out with any response in terms of Scunthorpe. They're saying that
but hold on, you can't blame this on Labour. I mean, this has been a long time.
So this package that's put forward is similar to what we were going to put forward, that was criticised by Labour, but we also were going to bridge the gap between, whereas Labour have left this area high and dry, in effect, for the next 5 years, and they've said, we'll come forward with a plan on steel next spring. Now, that is a massive gap of time. Now, if they're going to tackle it, they should be tackling it now. This is a party that are supposed to stand for this cohort of people more than others, and they're not doing so.
These people have been in office about 100 days. If you're in South Wales now, I mean, this has been coming down the pike now for a very long time.
But it's not the case that the Conservatives did nothing on this. So the Conservatives invested $500 million. They had this plan ready to go, but they also were going to bridge the gap so there was a transition period, so it wasn't just left with nothing. And Labour have just basically been a bit lazy here, in my opinion. They've took that plan and they've not supported people throughout this period. It will be important, of course, that people are offered reskilling and upskilling opportunities, but what a massive end of an era. How tragic is this for the local community as well?
I feel very... Are you in that local community? Not just at the steel plant, by the way, but this will have a knock-on effect at the different restaurants, cafes, whatever, right across the community. James, where are you on it?
This is part of economic vandalism that we've seen in Britain for at least 40 years. The Port Talbot steel should be a key strategic industry. We need to have steel for all sorts of things. And instead of doing what should have happened in 2016, it could have happened many years beforehand, which was to take it into public ownership, view it as a strategic industry and engage with the workers and the union there about the transition so that there isn't a gap, so that you are able to carry on producing steel there the entire time, which would also safeguard the jobs.
But Tata reckoned that they was losing £1 million a day on this plant, so would you have nationalised those losses?
I would have nationalised the plant, yes. So Tata, basically what they've done for the last 8 years is say, can we have a state handout to keep it going? That's all they've asked for. Not, are we going to change our policy? Are we going to engage with the workers? Are we going to be integrated into some actual industrial strategy for where the steel is going to go? None of that was done. So, yes, Tata Steel got some money to carry on running it, and then they can shutter it. The losers are, of course, the workers, and as you say, the community around, but also the country as a whole, because we now no longer have this strategic industry. And both the Tories and Labour for the last few years have spoken about industrial strategy. There has been no industrial strategy. They've said the words industrial strategy, but nothing that is joined up. You know, we are told that we have to have, and we do have to have, a big energy transition, which means different types of industries. Steel is very important to that. And instead of supporting our steel industry, we've let it go to the dogs.
Yeah, but when you're talking about clean energy or whatever, it's a little bit ludicrous, really, when an organisation is citing environmental concerns for closing a plant while simultaneously creating a new blast furnace in India. So if you was really bothered about emissions and all the rest of it, you wouldn't be doing that. So then what happens is this chasing this desperate pursuit of net zero, everyone in this country is going, well, hang on a second, why are we being disadvantaged by that when every other, well, not every other country, but many other countries, China, India, whatever, they're popping up new stations?
Tata have used all sorts of different excuses for why they want to shutter the plant and have been doing so for 8 years. The answer should have been, and it would have saved us a lot of money because we wouldn't have put in the money that we put in to prop up it for still the same net result, which is that it's closing. That's why it should have been taken into public ownership, and then you could have a real plan, a proper transition plan, which would engage the workers to have it as an electric blast furnace at some point going forward.
So you think that an experienced business couldn't make the sums stack up and make it cost-effective production, but you think the government could have done?
Yeah, because I think the incentives are different. The incentives for Tata Steel there is to get as much money as they can out of it. For us as a country, it would have been to have steel for our domestic industry as part of an industrial strategy. There are benefits to having steel which don't just go to the shareholders of the company, which we would have been able to realise as having as part of our industrial strategy.
Is that fair, what you say?
No, I think the reality is that India, etc., are undercutting the UK, especially in labour costs, and it is important that we do invest in technology and we progress, but it's so important as well that we look after people's jobs and we look after communities, and leaving an area with nothing for a number of years, in which case we have to then import steel, which is even worse for the environment, is not a good answer.
But then have you let down these communities, though?
Well, look, Tata Steel have come for handouts and government support throughout the years many, many times, and we worked with them to try and make sure that it was sustainable in the long run. And as I said, invested $500 million in this long-term plan. But now there's no bridging of the gap, and we still don't know what the government's position is on Scunthorpe, which is the very last place that we're producing steel now.
It's very sad, isn't it? Because you've got to think, these communities, many of these people will have worked there, often for generations, actually. It'll be, I don't know, the granddad, the dads, the sons, and then you're taking those, you know, those opportunities. You're taking people's kind of core from them, because it's not just a job. I'm sure people get paid for what they do, but it's not just about the wage and the economic thing, the sense of pride, self-dependence, so on and so forth. It goes on and on. It's very sad news, I think, for Wales. What do you make to it all? Lots I need to discuss with you after the break. Rosie Duffield, she's resigned. Is she going to be the first of many? Also, apparently she says Keir Starmer's got a woman problem. Has he? Your thoughts?
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The next 24 hours stays damp and blustery in the east, but it does dry up elsewhere. Brighter skies coming along in the west later on Tuesday. Finally, a drier period to give us all a respite from all the rain, but it is going to take its time as this low slowly clears eastwards. It's still going to bring further rain to northern England, into parts of the Midlands overnight, East Anglia, as well as North Wales. Now, that rain does turn more showery in the west, the north and the northwest, seeing plenty of clear spells overnight under those clear skies. Temperatures falling into the single figures. But it's blustery elsewhere as we start off Tuesday, and there's certainly more rain to come across parts of East Midlands into East Anglia and down that North Sea coast. Now, we've got a few showers across Aberdeenshire into the Great Glen, but otherwise plenty of bright weather across much of northern and western Scotland. Northern Ireland, a lovely start to the day. Blue skies here, just one or two mist patches. Likewise for northwest England, but for Wales and the southwest, areas of cloud floating about and a few showers. Nevertheless, it's the eastern side of England where we continue to see a strong wind, gales for some exposed North Sea coasts and further spells of rain. The rain tending to become lighter through the day, but it's going to stay feeling miserable, I think, under that wet weather, and with a lot of low cloud along with the brisk breeze. Temperatures of 12 or 13 Celsius in the east, whilst further west where we do get some sunshine, 15 to 17 degrees. Now into Wednesday, there'll be yet more showers coming in on a northeasterly breeze across parts of East Anglia into the southeast. But elsewhere, much brighter skies. Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, West Wales and the southwest, seeing plenty of sunshine. Those sunny skies transfer east through Thursday and into Friday. So a few days, at least, of drier and brighter weather.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Problems on two stretches of the A1M. First of all, the motorway is down to a single lane heading north through County Durham, just north of the Bradbury Interchange, junction 60. Those emergency bridge repair works are underway. It's taking about half an hour to get through. Further south through Nottinghamshire, the northbound carriageway is blocked from junction 34 to 35 towards the M18 following an accident. In Greater Manchester at Wigan, the A577 Southgate blocked on the one-way stretch by flooding. Still really slow down the M6 through the West Midlands, heading south of Wolverhampton just after junction 10 after a lorry broke down. In Surrey, south of Farnham, the A287 at Frensham closed following an accident. And ScotRail trains have been suspended in Aberdeen and Inverness after a car hit a bridge at Inverurie, and buses are still in for trains between Birmingham New Street and Shrewsbury because of flooding at Wellington. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewbs and I'm with you until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got my panel, Michelle Donnellan and James Schneider alongside me. Lots of you getting in touch. Honestly, this whole conversation that Kemi Badenoch, she started when she was basically saying that maternity, you know, the kind of policies, etc., are a little bit too burden-like for smaller businesses. So many people getting in touch saying, quite frankly, you wouldn't hire women of childbearing age. And I've got to say, it's a lot of women getting in touch and saying that to me. Karen, you've just said, Michelle, obviously, I was resigned to the fact I had to pay, but I hated and resented having to pay for accumulated annual leave on top of maternity pay when they just basically essentially had a year off. Well, that conversation will continue. Neil, he is in Wales. We've just been talking about Port Talbot. He says he could sit and cry at the state of his nation. He served this country. He says he is ashamed at how it is turning out. Anyway, look, we run till 7 o'clock. There's lots I want to talk to you about tonight. Did you see what's going on in Austria? The rise of the populists, many will call them, continues. But first up, I want to talk to you, Rosie Duffield. Of course, you'll know she is the MP in Canterbury. She has resigned the Labour whip. And I can tell you now, the letter she wrote about Keir Starmer is absolutely... It is scathing. It's very long. If you haven't read it, I would encourage you to do. She basically cites things like the winter fuel allowance, not getting rid of the 2-child benefits cap, and she talks about being surrounded basically by lads and suggests that people are perhaps going into roles without the correct processes, is my interpretation of it. Michelle, this is quite damning. What do you think?
It is damning. It's a real humdinger of a letter. I've never seen one as punchy as this one before. And it does damage Keir and the government that one of his own people is actually now saying all of this stuff and directing it at him and really pulling the string of hypocrisy, which is at the heart of a lot of people's upset and anger over the last few weeks.
And she says as well that she doesn't feel that she's left the Labour Party. She says that she feels the Labour Party has left her, essentially. James, your thoughts?
There's a lot to agree with in the letter. A lot to agree with, and there are lots of criticisms of Keir Starmer and Keir Starmer's Labour that I would share. But I would ask, where was she when these changes were being made to the Labour Party by Keir Starmer, and why didn't she vote against the keeping the 2-child benefit cap and scrapping the winter fuel allowance for pensioners? And it could be the start of something a bit bigger. I mean, there are 400-odd Labour MPs, and there are unlikely to be 400-odd Labour MPs after the next election. And for a lot of them, they might take the calculus that being a maverick independent, if you're not part of Keir Starmer's in-crowd, then you're not going to be protected, I don't think. If they are, then they might get given given nice ministerial positions, but there are only about 100 of those. And so the calculus might change for some of them that being a bit of a maverick independent who's well known for campaigning on 1 or 2 issues is more likely to give them an ongoing career than being a backbencher and lobby fodder for a government as it becomes more unpopular.
And James says, where was she when it comes to the vote on the winter fuel and the 2-child benefits cap? Well, the answer to that was she abstained. Yeah. The reason that she said she abstained is because she feels that in politics you break into certain groups. And I saw an interview where she basically said she wants, I quote, my beliefs to be represented in Labour. So she wanted to stay in the Labour Party and influence. And I suspect we all know that she's talking about her gender-critical beliefs. What do you think?
So I think she's also talking about her broader beliefs as well, because we know that Keir was very clear on the child benefit vote that they were going to lose the party whip if they voted against, and they did. And you can't change a party unless you're within a party. Yeah. And you can see from the sentiment within her letter that she really wants Labour to change and to be in tune and in touch with its core grassroots and its people. So I feel that she's felt very conflicted about this, because now leaving it means that she can't try and influence Labour unless she can peel off more to join her.
Well, she was asked Rosie Duffield was asked a direct question about, do you basically think that Keir Starmer has a woman problem? And she answers, yes, she does think he's got a woman problem.
Yeah, so look, from my own experience, I've got no reason to believe he has, but I've never worked that closely with him like she has. We do know that he didn't stand up for her when she was getting countless death threats and horrendous abuse, and when she was sharing views that many, many women also share about standing up for women's rights. Yeah,
so gender-critical beliefs and stuff like that. What do you think, James?
I don't think because Keir Starmer hasn't been sufficiently harsh on trans people that means he has a woman problem. There is a thing about in the briefing wars that you see between the 2 bits of Number 10, there's supposedly the lads and those around Sue Gray, and that is a criticism that you hear, that there's a group of men that are one of the cliques, but not the only one. But these kind of it's hard to really discern what the person behind that kind of criminology actually thinks and operates, because it's all reflected through media reporting, and we all know that can be a little bit
Just to be clear as well, I imagine if Rosie Duffield was sitting here now, she would say to you, she doesn't want Keir Starmer to be what you've just said, which is unnecessarily harsh on trans people. She would argue that actually what she wants is for sex to basically mean biological sex, for women's spaces, female spaces, to be actually genuinely single sex. She would be very critical of self-ID and things like that, all perfectly reasonable policies.
So what's the reasonable policy? Self-ID is a reasonable policy?
No, don't confuse me. I absolutely think self-ID is absolutely absurd. So no, I don't think that's a reasonable policy.
Right.
But her positions, many would say, are very reasonable, that single-sex spaces should be linked to biological sex. So, for example, if you're an actual female, a biological female, you know you're not going to have a biological man in your space.
So I don't agree with her on those issues or in the way in which she expresses herself.
So you think biological men should be in female spaces?
Not necessarily, but I do think that that a trans woman or a trans man is a woman or a man, and so unless there are reasons which could be, for example, in prisons, or I'm sure there are cases where that would be the case, then they should be treated as such, and that is not in any way an attack on men or on women.
Go on. I was just going to say, Michelle, I think you've hit the nail on the head, that these views are reasonable that Rosie was expressing, but she was made to feel like an extremist within her own party and ostracised and given no support when she was stating a view that many, many women in our population are concerned about.
So if we want to talk about someone who has had real problems and not got support, for example, there's Epsana Begum, who's the MP for Poplar and Limehouse, who was the victim of coercive behaviour, who received no support and was also had the whip removed for voting for against the two-child limit. And from what I've read in the press, she hasn't received support. I mean, I don't think it is necessarily.
But that would then feed into what Rosie is saying, essentially, when she says that Starmer's got what she would call a woman's problem.
I'm saying that may or may not be the case, but I don't think that's because he doesn't share her particular views on trans and on gender. You could argue, as she does in her letter, that, for example, the treatment of Diane Abbott by Keir Starmer and by his core team was disgraceful.
She just said that, you're right.
Which it was. There are a number of these cases. He's also acted, in my view, disgracefully on a whole range of other things, so I don't think it's only on this.
Let's cut to the chase. Should there be a by-election triggered, do you think?
So usually I would say yes if somebody had crossed the floor and gone to another party, and I actually think the rules need changing on that because that's not what people have voted for. But in this case, she has made herself, in effect, an independent Labour MP. So she said she's going to stay very true to her core values and beliefs and champion Labour policies. It's not like she's joined the Conservatives or the Liberal Democrats like we've seen before. And in those scenarios, I think it's very different. In this case, I think it's more nuanced. So I wouldn't be in favour of a by-election and the cost and the upheaval that would produce.
Do you think there should be a by-election?
In general terms, I think when people cross the floor, there should be. That's quite a reasonable argument for why, in this case, there shouldn't. If I were going to have a series of democratic reforms in Britain, that would be on the list, but pretty low down, because there's a whole load of other things. So I think that sounds reasonable, although in general terms, I think if you cross the floor, you should.
Are you in that constituency? If you vote for someone and people will say, some people will say, well, actually, I do vote for the party. Other people will say, well, actually, I do vote for the individual. But if you voted for someone that had the Labour rosette on and then decided to be an independent, what do you think to that? And is it all fair? Should there be? Because many people are saying, actually, it's very hypocritical to let their or to kind of argue for there not to be a by-election in this case with Rosie, because people kind of approve of what she's doing and what she stands for, but then simultaneously be equally banging the drum and demanding people push for by-elections when it's people essentially that they don't like.
I think the different scenarios, though, if somebody goes to a completely different political party and they're saying they're done with their original party forever, whereas Rosie's actually said in her letter that she hopes to get back to the Labour Party as soon as it is positioning itself in a different manner, and that she's going to continue to support Labour causes and values. Whereas when we've seen people cross the floor completely, I think that that's disgraceful, and that does undermine our democracy.
I think it should be easier to recall your MP, and then that solves this problem. If people are in Canterbury don't like the fact that she's become an independent, then they can, through petitioning, they can have that by-election if they want it. That's probably an easier way to do it.
Lee's got in touch. He says, Michelle, in his view, Rosie Duffield was discriminated against and hounded out by her own party for simply stating facts. It wasn't beliefs, it was facts. Things like your biological sex is immutable and you cannot change it. Lee would argue, as would I, that is absolutely a fact. Why would anyone be discriminated against for that? There's lots of views on this. I mean, I'm particularly keen, if you are in her seat, how do you feel? Do you support that she's become independent or not? Look, I want to talk to you about populism. Many people would call it far right. Over in Austria, the Freedom Party now got quite the result, I have to say. What do you make to it? I'll see you in 2.
This Sunday, join me, Camilla Tominey, for an exclusive interview with one of the most controversial, influential and unique political figures of our time. Boris Johnson will be in studio discussing his new memoir, Unleashed, the gripping story of how he dealt with plotting politicians, problematic princes and a pandemic. From Boris bikes to Brexit and everything else in between. This Sunday at 9:30 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Earlier this week, Olympic swimmer Adam Peaty finally proposed to his girlfriend, because I've been waiting for this, the daughter of Gordon Ramsay, with a gorgeous yellow diamond ring.
Yeah, so the demand for coloured diamonds in the last 10 years has soared by, guess how much, 77% between 2010 and 2019. Joining us now to tell us more about some of the hottest trends in the diamond world is dealer to the stars, Neil Dutson. Good morning, Neil. Morning, Ben. And I've got one of your exemplary examples. Look at this bad boy.
So
What's this one?
That's a very rare Muso Colombian emerald. And it's alpine green translucent, so it's a really stunning
See if
colour.
we get a close-up.
So, yeah, so pretty impressive.
Can I be very crude and ask how much this is worth?
So value is £200,000.
How much, sorry?
£200,000. Now, the reason is its rarity. It's minor oiling. It's very, very, very pretty. The 2 diamonds on the side are D-colour, flawless diamonds, just to accentuate the setting.
Neil, how did you get into diamonds?
I studied diamonds in Antwerp. So Antwerp used to be the diamond capital of the world, really. Yeah. 85% of the world's diamonds go through Antwerp, or used to. And now Dubai has taken over. And yeah, I just went to a school there. I learnt about diamonds, and I just didn't want to be seen off in the future.
Neil, I'm very concerned I'm going to drop 200 grand's worth of diamonds into my cup of tea, so can I give that back to you?
Absolutely.
But I can hold one if you like.
Oh, well, I've got
Neil.
a lovely one here.
Thank you.
So this is a fancy vivid yellow. It's 8 carats.
This is my dream ring, just so you know, for this hand. This would be
Is it big
amazing.
enough?
So what would I call this? A yellow?
So that's a natural fancy vivid yellow diamond. Value £300,000. So,
it fits
depends
like
where you're buying it from.
If it's like a glove, Neil, maybe it's a sign. It's meant to be mine.
Definitely a sign, yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Honestly, ladies and gents, I think sometimes the most interesting conversations go on in the break. We've just had this whole conversation about can you actually change your sex? I mean, I've got to say, I'll summarise my view. No, you can't. I feel very strongly about that, and I'm sure many of you will have completely different views that you feel equally as strong about. Anyway, look, Michelle Donnellan, the former Culture Secretary, and James Schneider alongside me tonight. Look, populism. Many people will call it different things, but over in Austria, we've now seen the Freedom Party. They have secured quite a historic victory, I have to say. Many people, within seconds of hearing the words Freedom Party or whatever, they'll immediately kind of say this is all far right. We hear this often. Those terms kind of get bandied around often. Where are you on this whole thing and what it says about Europe's direction as a whole?
So we're seeing a movement across Europe of people that are genuinely fed up, especially about immigration, both legal and illegal. We saw it here in the UK. We saw that rise in the percentage that the reform got as well, because motivated mainly because people are so exacerbated by the fact that they've heard politicians say a lot but not do a lot on some of these key issues that they deeply care about, including immigration. And that's been intensified by the cost of living crisis. And we're not alone in that. We're seeing that happen in Austria and other countries too.
Yes.
So I don't call them populist because I'm a populist. I mean, I'm a left populist. They're right populist. But the Freedom Party has its roots in Nazism. In its founders were former members of the Nazi Party, and it has a whole range of far-right policies and far-right rhetorics. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody...
Like what? So just in case anyone's not familiar, what are these far-right policies, for example?
So in terms of their rhetoric, for example, one of their main slogans that was on billboards is one line before it is a dog whistle, one line before it is something from the Nazis, for example.
What does that mean? Sorry. I've no idea what you're talking about.
It's slightly difficult to explain, but
So you're telling me something that's on a billboard is so offensive that you can't even say it?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying this particular dog whistle.
Right.
They have a slogan, and the previous line in the song comes from a Nazi thing, so it's a dog whistle towards that. Anyway, their background is in the far right. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody who is voting for them has decided that they're fully paid up far-rightists. Of course not. There are a whole range of reasons why people are voting for them. But I do think it is alarming, and it will continue to happen, I think, and it is spreading across Europe.
What's so alarming about it, in your view?
Well, I don't think having racists in government is a particularly good thing. So I think that's quite alarming. I think if you look at the far-right parties that
Obviously, they would say they're not racist.
Fine, but if you look at the far-right parties that are on the rise, and if you look at the things that they have said, I find those not the kinds of things I'd like to have in the society I'm in. And then if you look at them in government, so Giorgia Meloni, for example, in Italy, the sorts of policies that
she far-right as well, just so I understand.
Yeah, I mean, you could say hard right, you could say far right. I mean, she's maybe slightly different in that she has accommodated herself more to the EU and to NATO. So maybe you could say she's hard right. But it's in this basic penumbra. And then we don't have to get that over the top on terminology.
But I think it's important because I think it's all got a bit daft. Because basically the commonality between so many of these parties is that so many people now are concerned about uncontrolled immigration.
So they are to the right.
They are
to the right. There is a mainstream right-wing party, which is pretty right-wing, in Austria, and they are a party which is considered to be to its right on the political spectrum. That's why people say far right or hard right. Now, I don't think that alone is having a semantic argument about whether they do or don't sit to the right of the mainstream Conservative Party. Is that useful? I mean, objectively, they do.
Right, because I find this really interesting. When you see what's going on across Europe described, Michelle, you will nearly always see the descriptions far right this and far right that and far right this and far right that. And what people actually mean is that it's people who are primarily passionate about controlling their borders and having controlled migration policies. And I think you're saying it's semantics far right. I don't think it is semantics. I think it's deliberate use of words to try to shame people into changing their thought process around things like migration.
Yeah, so in general, I agree with you. I think this particular party, if we look at its specific history and its origins, it is steeped in Nazism, and there's no way of disputing that when you look at who set it up, its membership, some of its beliefs over the years. So that is a slightly different kettle of fish. But in general, I do agree with you. And I think one of the problems that has arisen is the fact that we've tried to stifle debate. That was something that I warned about when I was in the Department for Education, tried to stand up for free speech, because unless we have a proper, full and frank political discourse, you will see problems like we've been seeing for the last year, and the problems of the riots, etc., because people feel that they can't just articulate their opinions on these topics.
Hold on. Do you think that the reason that people attacked mosques was because they weren't able to articulate
No, I didn't say that, did I? So what I was saying is that if we are stifling free speech and debate, you're just containing a problem, and it's going to bubble and bubble and bubble until it explodes. Whereas we actually need to get to the root causes of some of these issues and actually discuss them and have a grown-up and constructive debate about them. And to Michelle's point, you know, issues like immigration aren't just concerns of people on the right. In fact, I know many people on the left that are concerned about these topics too.
So I don't think that saying that the Front National in France, because it is to the right of the mainstream right-wing, the traditional right-wing parties there, is far right, or the same in Italy, or whatever, is in any way stifling freedom of speech about migration and refugee policy. No. That's why I find it, I find it a bit bizarre.
Do you not feel, let me ask you, do you not feel that people throw around, and I'm not just talking about in European elections, I'm talking about much more broadly, do you not think that people deliberately and categorically deliberately misuse the phrase far right, and they do so, I would argue, to try and shame people into almost silence and criticism, to stop the criticism of the appalling migration policies that we have now? Do you not think that that goes on?
So it's very hard to say, if you present the question like that, it's very hard to say no, because you said people. So you can point to one instance where it does seem like that's the case.
No, not one instance.
In general terms, the hard right and the far right are on the rise, not just in Europe, but around the world. And this is a global phenomenon which you can see in the Philippines and in India and Brazil and the US and Europe and yes, also here in Britain.
So what's causing it then?
I think in part it is caused by the fallout from the 2008 financial crisis and the failure of what was the elite centre, the centre-left and the centre-right, to put forward something coherent to the public in many countries, and that's why that's in part why you see this thing rising. It also learns from each other, and I think labelling something which is a growing phenomenon, which is either replacing what was the mainstream right, or it is cannibalising it, and it is then taking it over, as we've seen, for example, with Trump and the Republicans in the US. Calling that phenomenon a term isn't to silence the debate about what it's about.
But it isn't far right to be concerned about the levels of immigration, both illegal and legal. It's just common sense.
Well, I don't think it is necessarily just common sense, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily far right either.
That is what's happening.
That's an elision that Michelle made. I would not say, for example, that someone who wants to have a lower level of migration in Britain is far right because they want to have a lower level of migration in Britain. I would say someone is far right if they carry water for racist street violence, for example.
If they do what?
Carry water for racist street violence.
But who does that?
Many people in British public life.
Do they?
Let's take the first 10
All right, tell me one person then in British public life that basically supports racist street violence.
So I think that in the first, let's say, 10 days of the racist violence that we saw this summer...
What racist violence?
There was attacks on mosques, they were pulling people out of their cars. We're talking about the same thing, right?
Oh, yeah, we're talking about the white people that were trying to pull people out of the cars for being brown, and then we're talking about the brown people that was trying to pull people out of their cars for being white. We're talking about that, yeah?
That's not what happened, but
it is. categorically is, by the way. And also, just so we know, that the example that you give, it was a horrendous example because one of those examples occurred in Hull, where you had people trying to attack what they call foreigners in cars because they had brown skin. One of those people, it's my hometown, was actually a refugee himself from Morocco, just so we're clear.
So one of which people? The
people
attackers?
one of the attackers that was trying to attack, quote, foreigners was himself a refugee, apparently.
But that doesn't change the fact that people were on a racist basis attacking people in their cars.
But who are the public figures that are advocating it?
Or that Moss were... I said carry water for. I think we saw a lot in those 10 days of people saying, oh, no, there are questions to ask about what really happened in Southport, echoing the language that was being used to mobilise for these riots, these racist attacks. We saw lots of that.
Well, there you go. What do you think to that? One of my viewers, George, has just got in touch. He says he is in Rosie Duffield's constituency and he doesn't think there should be a by-election. He absolutely continues to support her. Look, I'm sure these conversations will carry on. I've appreciated the debate this evening. I know many of my viewers have too. But look, time flies, doesn't it? Thank you very much, Michelle, for your company. James, for yours too. And thank you to each and every one of you at home. But don't go anywhere, though, because up next it's GBN tonight, but that's all from me, and I will see you tomorrow. So have yourselves a fantastic evening. Night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. In the next 24 hours stays damp and blustery in the east, but it does dry up elsewhere. Brighter skies coming along in the west later on Tuesday. Finally, a drier period to give us all a respite from all the rain, but it is going to take its time as this low slowly clears eastwards. It's still going to bring further rain to northern England, into parts of the Midlands overnight, East Anglia, as well as North Wales. Now, that rain does turn more showery in the west, the north and the northwest, seeing plenty of clear spells overnight under those clear skies. Temperatures falling into the single figures. But it's blustery elsewhere as we start off Tuesday, and there's certainly more rain to come across parts of East Midlands into East Anglia and down that North Sea coast. Now, we've got a few showers across Aberdeenshire into the Great Glen, but otherwise plenty of bright weather across much of northern and western Scotland. Northern Ireland, a lovely start to the day. Blue skies here, just one or two mist patches. Likewise for northwest England, but for Wales and the southwest, areas of cloud floating about and a few showers. Nevertheless, it's the eastern side of England where we continue to see a strong wind, gales for some exposed North Sea coasts and further spells of rain. The rain tending to become lighter through the day, but it's going to stay feeling miserable, I think, under that wet weather, and with a lot of low cloud along with the brisk breeze. Temperatures of 12 or 13 Celsius in the east, whilst further west where we do get some sunshine, 15 to 17 degrees. Now into Wednesday, there'll be yet more showers coming in on a northeasterly breeze across parts of East Anglia into the southeast. But elsewhere, much brighter skies. Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, West Wales and the southwest, seeing plenty of sunshine. Those sunny skies transfer east through Thursday and into Friday. So a few days at least of drier and brighter weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News. The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. The A1M in County Durham is down to a single lane once again today, northbound, about a mile or so north of the Bradbury interchange. Emergency bridge repair works are underway and it's taking about half an hour to get through. In South Yorkshire on the M18, the southbound exit to the southbound M1 is closed where a car's broken down at the M1 turnoff. And in Greater Manchester, the A577 Southgate closed on that one-way stretch through Wigan because of flooding. In Nottinghamshire, south of Ollerton, the A614 remains closed along the Old Rufford Road at the Billsthorpe turn-off at the scene of a four-vehicle collision. In Leicester City Centre, the A50 is closed on High Cross Street because of an unsafe building. In Surrey, south of Farnham, the A287 at Frensham closed following an accident. And ScotRail train suspended Aberdeen to Inverness after a car hit a bridge in Inverurie. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
There's still plenty of time to grab your chance to win a whopping £36,000 cash in the Great British Giveaway. That's like having £3,000 each month for an entire year. Extra cash in your bank account that you can do whatever you like with.